How do we rid our augmented and virtual reality from algorithmic bias? I'm Tanya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Tom Emrich. He is a thought leader and futurist, partner at Super Ventures, and community builder at AWE. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you for having me.
So what type of work does Super Ventures do?
We invest in early stage augmented reality companies. And we do this because we believe that augmented reality is the next wave of computing that's going to give people superpowers. That's why our fund is called Super Ventures.
Very funny tie-in. It's very clear. So we know virtual reality is an immersive experience, and you might get a set of goggles, or augmented reality is often a visually superimposed on an actual view from a camera. But what is XR?
Right. Okay. So XR is an acronym that often means extended reality, which encompasses all the non-real realities. Okay. So virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. So these terminologies are being used to describe the next wave of computing, which has a lot to do with a shift from 2D computing to 3D computing. So interacting with a computer, which is a 2D screen, to going inside the computer into a simulation, which is virtual reality, or seeing through a mobile phone or a screen on your eye, as in smart glasses, to see a mixture of the real world and a digital reality, which is in the case of augmented reality. So this new wave is all about interacting with computing in a much more natural way, whether you're wholly consumed, again, VR, or whether you see the world and the digital world at the same time, which is AR. And XR is this umbrella term that covers the spectrum between the two.
The question often comes up when we discuss bias and machine learning. How do we fix it? So how do we ensure that we're building solutions for computers that are inclusive of all people?
Right. This is a really important point because as I mentioned, this next wave of computing, AR and VR, it is about 3D, but also the big component is about giving computers senses through cameras, through accelerometers, through other means to be able to understand the environment, and as part of the environment, the people that are in the environment. So not only are they able to gather information, but with AI, they're able to process information. So for example, a camera allows the computer to see, but computer vision, which is leveraging the input from the camera and AI, allows the computer to recognize faces. And so there is a term called algorithmic bias, which means that the solutions that we are creating, they need to ensure that we're not coding in an algorithmic bias so that the computer only sees a certain type of face, be it gender, be it race, and so on. So this is a really critical point to make as we're developing this next wave of computing, that since we are actually treating computers like humans, who are humanizing computers, we should not pass on some of our implicit bias that is part of our society today, because this would in turn mean that these solutions are not servicing a specific segment of the world.
Twitter handles, avatars, screen names, apps on your phone that give you a kitten image. I mean, or Apple's Memoji. I mean, we already have alternative identities online. Has technology made us more accepting?
I think what you're referring to is this digital twin. We have these handles, right? And I think a lot of us that grew up in bulletin board systems and AOL and chat rooms, you could hide behind, a handle that was maybe not your real name, oftentimes not your real name. And this was the beginning. But with virtual reality, where you could assume an entirely different person or even an entire different species, you don't even need to be human. Or as you mentioned with Memoji or Snapchat's filters, doing the same with a mobile device right now, but eventually with a pair of smart glasses, which would make it persistent, it means that we could potentially do away with our fixed identity, meaning the identity that we get up and get out of bed with, and start to just express ourselves at whim, provided that we have access to this code, provided we have access to be able to download a new avatar. I could be a unicorn today, I could be a giraffe tomorrow, I could be a woman on Friday. It's however I want to express myself. And this identity that is driven by embodiment could really allow for us to learn a lot more about ourselves, because we get to play with different identities, with different forms, with different genders and races, which in turn should also allow for us to gain an increased amount of empathy for those creatures, for those human avatars that we embody, which hopefully would allow for this world to be a much more accepting place.
How can XR help combat discrimination? I mean, and why does it matter to businesses?
Well, I mean, I read a stat somewhere that diversity and bias training is like an $8 billion a year industry, where companies are spending a lot of money to ensure that their teams are not baking in implicit bias when they're making decisions, that everybody is treated equal, that everybody has access to knowledge, skills within the organization, and that the team makeup itself is diverse, which is critical because a diverse team is best for business. That's just a fact. And it's the right thing to do. And so what's great about what we're seeing in the virtual reality sector especially is this use of simulation to evolve what is currently being done with, almost like YouTube how-to videos. Right now, diversity and inclusion training and implicit bias detection is really being done with on paper or in person or video methods. And the number one thing that falls down here is recall. There's not a lot of stickiness with these types of training methods. If you were to jump into a simulation where you yourself are pointed out your implicit bias, or where you could embody another gender, another race, to actually walk a mile in their shoes. I read a stat that the actual recall and stickiness of that experience increases to up to 90% from 20% with those other means, which means that you're not just checking a box. It's not just about compliance. It's moving past compliance to actually change how that person thinks and how they feel. And hopefully that means that when they actually go back into the real world, they'll have the muscle memory needed to make specific and significant changes to make this a better working environment and a better world in total.
How do imperfect people craft algorithms that do not reflect their own bias and preferences?
Well, I mean, imperfect people, so you're saying, like, how do we as humans make our computers more perfect? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it takes a village. That's kind of, I guess, my answer. I don't think I have the answer to it. I think the first step is identifying that. I think it goes back to actually what we were just talking about, which is our team makeups can no longer be just one type of person. And the decisions can no longer be made by just one type of person, because we are literally humanizing computers. And so we need to ensure that when we're creating computer vision-based solutions, or solutions that are sensor-based with computers that are backed with AI, that the team makeup, from the designer to the product manager to the developer, that makeup of the team has a diverse background, and that those voices are equally heard to ensure that it's representative of all parts of the world. I think that's the only way that we can safeguard to just passing this on to our computer generation.
If we aren't prepared, where can this take us?
If we're not prepared, it means that we're going to create an entire for lack of better words, race of computers that are going to adopt the biases that we have in this world, that are really at the crux of a lot of our problems, that are causing a lot of suffering, that are causing a lot of pain, that are causing an unequal access to knowledge, skills, capability, money, healthcare. I don't think we're unfamiliar with what happens when we bake in prejudice and discrimination into society. So if we continue to pass this on to computers that are starting to make decisions on our behalf, that are starting to be much more active in and our decision making, that are changing our perception of reality, literally by modifying what we hear and what we see. It could really exasperate all the woes and what's wrong with society today. And I'll give you a really good example. Right now in social media, we talk a lot about the echo chambers and the filter bubbles, where we in our social circle that we've created on Facebook or Twitter, where we emphasize the same conversations and the same thinking by following people that are more like us. In an augmented reality world, because augmented reality allows for the computer to get access to our sense of sight, it's not just about surrounding ourselves with what people are thinking, those same like-minded people, but it could allow for computers to be able to force the world to look a certain way. So if we only want to see certain people around us, the computer will have the power to be able to do that. Or if we don't want to see certain people, they could censor those people completely. This isn't entirely possible today, but this is a potential outcome if we don't start thinking about how these technologies could impact inclusion and equality across the board.
What are some examples of how XR is adding skills and abilities to people?
Well, actually, there's some really good examples in the enterprise right now, especially with augmented reality. Augmented reality has the ability to turn an amateur worker into a professional overnight. And so there are a lot of augmented reality enterprise software suites like Scope AR, like UbiMax, like Upskill, that are doing work with Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Caterpillar. And they're essentially doing almost like a paired task management, where the human and the computer work in tandem by the use of smart glasses. And so what I mean by that is that you could throw a worker on the line with a pair of smart glasses that is programmed to provide an overlay to show that worker what they should be doing, step 1 to step 10, step by step by step, so that that worker now has a reduction in the error in the work that they do, and they're able to be much more efficient at what they do because they have the entire task outlined by the computer, while the human itself actually performs it. On the flip side, these same types of solutions could allow for the worker to lend their pair of eyes to someone at home office, for example, that has a lot more experience, that could do the same thing, that could walk them through and troubleshoot a task, which would reduce the need for that pro to fly in to where they might be on the field, for example. So the ROI is definitely there. So this is a really great example of democratizing knowledge, democratizing skills, which is a real big advantage that augmented reality is promising to afford to all people in all areas of our life, both work and at home and in interacting with people from a personal level.
What technology helps us become more compassionate?
I think right now, the most popular answer to that is virtual reality. Virtual reality is being touted the empathy machine. And again, it is, I found this quote from Jeremy Balanson from the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab that talked about how walking a mile in someone else's shoes is exactly what VR was made for. And we've used this phrase, you don't know someone until you walk a mile in their shoes, quite a bit, but we really haven't been able to do that. We've been trying to do that with other mediums like books or movies or, videos. And it still forces us to use our imagination. Virtual reality allows us to embody other people. And as it gets more and more real, it's going to literally feel like we are those characters that we choose to embody. And so I don't see how it's possible for us to leave that experience and not be changed as a human, to increase our empathy for both ourselves and for somebody else.
Tom Emrich, thought leader and futurist community builder at AWE and partner at SuperVentures. Thank you so much for shedding some light on XR in general and how this part of technology is changing quickly. If somebody wants to connect with you, maybe they want to find out more about your work, how can they do that?
I'm a big fan of Twitter, so just find me on Twitter at Tom Emrich, TOMEMRICH. I'll see you there.
Sounds good. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can do that right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or maybe find me on Twitter at Tanya Hall Radio, or go to my website, tanyahall.net. I've got links to all my social sites. Thanks for watching.